Hey, welcome to Wonderful Works Talks, where we talk all about the disability ministry mission of helping churches become accessible for all. I'm your host, Barb Stanley, and today we're going to talk about an important part of disability ministry that sometimes gets overlooked, but really shouldn't. And that is how churches can teach the gospel to people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. But before we get to that, I want to stop and ask you a question. What does it really mean to be part of the church? And why is how we answer that question so important to families impacted by disability? Well, today we're going to talk about that and why it matters so much that every person in the church has a chance to know the gospel. And we're going to learn about some really cool adapted biblical curriculum that every church needs to check out. So I'm so excited to welcome our guests, Laura Deeken of The Adapted Word and Cortney Jenkins of Awe and Wonder. Well, today we are so excited to be talking to some people who are making a huge difference for families affected by disability. I saw both of these ladies at the Disability and the Church Conference and was blown away with their presentation. So I'm so excited to be introducing Cortney Jenkins from Awe and Wonder and Laura Deeken from The Adapted Word.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you.
So, Cortney, can you tell us a little bit about Awe and Wonder, what it is, and what inspired you to start it?
Absolutely. So, All in Wonder is a ministry that creates adapted Bible curriculum to help churches and families to be able to teach students with intellectual disabilities about the Bible. And I'm a former special education teacher, and I originally went to school and graduated for biblical studies. And so the Lord has just really woven those passions of special education and understanding how to teach students who have disabilities with the passion for biblical literacy and teaching students about the Bible.
Laura, would you tell us a little bit about the Adapted Word?
Sure. The Adapted Word is designed to help anyone working with children with disabilities easily and effectively teach the Bible. I'm a speech language pathologist. I was working in the schools. I avoided working with children with disabilities at my church because I had a day job. But once I started, I fell in love with it. My therapy world, my church world collided and didn't plan this, but here we are.
Yeah, we sometimes find out the best faith stories start with, I never expected this to happen. So I think we all have that in common here. But yet God always knows, and so he kind of calls you to where he wants you. So why is it so important that churches learn how to teach the gospel to students with intellectual disabilities?
I believe that people with disabilities, we're coming to realize more and more that it's a population of people who have largely been forgotten by the church. I don't necessarily think that, the church has been malicious and we want to exclude these people, but I don't think that it's been on the forefront of anyone's mind that we need to be effectively and intentionally reaching people with disabilities and their families. But we can't just stop at we need to be more inclusive or we need to reach people with disabilities because most ministry leaders, most volunteers just don't have training on how to serve people with disabilities. And there's a lot of fear that comes with that. There's a lot of confusion, nervousness, overwhelm. And so having knowledge and understanding is really key to being able to effectively reach this population of people.
Mm-hmm. I want to stop and talk about something you just said. So you talked about inclusion. And I've noticed over the past few years, talking with different churches who want to become more inclusive for people with disabilities, that sometimes there is a misunderstanding of what inclusion really means. And sometimes churches think inclusion means people are able to be in a class or are allowed to be in a class, even if their needs are different. What do you think that inclusion really means, and how does that include offering biblical teachings in a way that really connects?
So I think that there are a lot of different ideas, like you said, about inclusion, and we can think about inclusion as being a part of a children's ministry or a Sunday school class of typically developing peers. But really, in my mind, inclusion is being a part of the church,
Mhm.
being a welcomed part of the church, being a valued part of the church, and not just being someone that they know of, but that people in the church community actually know. And so, yes, there has to be opportunities for that community to be built, but I don't necessarily think that it always has to mean that there are like just inclusive settings for teaching the Bible because we do know that some students have significant needs and we can be effective in presenting the gospel in different ways to them. But I also think that we need to make sure that we are providing opportunities for that community to be built for all students.
Hmm. Laura, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, we know that around 6% at least of children in the US have disabilities.
Hmm.
So I have a lot of people who say, I have a small church, but most likely you have a child with disabilities. I don't believe really in diagnoses as much as I believe in needs.
Hmm.
So when people ask me how do I start a special needs ministry, I always ask back, what do you need? It's easy to see
Hmm.
a beautiful sensory room or a big church that they have the buddy system or they have inclusion or a separate area, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right for your church. So you have to be aware of what the needs are more than the disabilities in order to serve your church population. And I also believe that, with what we're learning about disabilities, we shouldn't just limit it to children, but we have to remember that they are made in the image of God. I often hear that children's ministry is not babysitting. By the same token, I would say disability ministry is not babysitting.
Right.
There may be days when we pull out the preferred toys and we just make it through that Sunday, and that's okay. But there are other Sundays when we can present the gospel, we can present the Bible. And if we're not doing that, then we're losing opportunities for witness, for testimony, and for belonging in the church.
I agree. And just to kind of piggyback off what you said, when you said not everything you see at every church is going to be right for your church. And that's right. Not every church is going to have a sensory room with all kinds of snazzy stuff. And not every church may have a one-on-one buddy or a separate classroom. But every church without exception, needs to have a way to teach the gospel. And that's what I love so much about what I learned from you guys in your presentation at Disability in the Church is that every church can learn how to do that for students. So, for those who are listening who are church leaders and thinking, I do have that student who learns differently, I don't know how to meet their needs with teaching the gospel, what would be the first step you would tell them to do?
The first thing that I would tell them to do is talk to the parents or caregivers
Mhm.
because they are going to know. And that's so important. A lot of our children with disability don't come to church because the families have been turned away from church. So by taking that first step with the parents and caregivers, you're showing we are interested, we want your family, we want your child, we want your knowledge, what keeps your child safe and loved.
Mhm.
And I would say that that is the biggest first step.
I definitely agree with that, Laura. Um, as far as, what do we do once we have that knowledge? When I'm talking to parents, I always reiterate, like, you are the expert on your child. And think about, like, with students with autism, we hear it said, like, if you've met one person with autism, you've
Mhm.
met one person with autism. Everyone is different. And that's true for anyone with disabilities. And
Mhm.
so, learning from the parents. But there are some specific things that we can do to be able to help support learners who need that extra help. So, one thing would be utilizing visual supports and structuring the classroom, whether that's in an inclusive setting in a typical classroom or in a separate setting. Having those visual supports of this is our schedule for the day. This is the space that we do this particular thing in, and then we're going to transition to another space. Just some of those simple things can help the student be able to better prepare for the lesson before you even get into actually teaching.
Yeah, that's very important. Now, with both of your curriculum, there is a heavy emphasis on that visual support. So, Courtney, can you start and kind of tell us a little bit about the curriculum that you produce and some of the hallmarks behind why you do it that way?
Yeah, so with our curriculum, kind of the main piece of the curriculum are our adapted Bible story books. And so those are taking a group of stories. So you have one book a month on four different levels of difficulty. And each week of the month, there's a different story, and they all kind of relate to each other as we walk through the big story of the Bible. And so we utilize symbol supports. So AAC symbols that students are used to seeing in class or that they may see on like a device that they use. And we utilize those to help them to better understand the Bible stories. And so those symbols and visuals can be used to pre-teach some content that are going to be coming up in the stories. So we have lesson plans and things that help prepare with some activities that are fun and sensory based. And then we have what we call repeated storylines as part of those adaptive Bible story books. And that's like the big main idea that we want students to understand from that week's story. And we repeat it on each page of the adapted book. It has those visual supports in it. It's just kind of like a main idea, a takeaway for the week.
How important is that repetitive teaching?
It's definitely important. Laura shared at our session that we were talking about. Laura, do you want to share? Do you remember those statistics offhand? It was really impactful.
Sure. For children without disabilities, it takes 12 to 15 repetitions, and those have to be meaningful to truly understand a concept. For children with disabilities, it can take anywhere from 75 to 150 and up. So, like Courtney said, we want to focus on those big ideas. Is it more important that we focus on Joseph had a coat or that God had plans for Joseph? We can tell the story and we can share the story and we can emphasize, Joseph's dad gave him a coat. God had plans for Joseph. Joseph's brothers were mad. God had plans for Joseph.
That's really good. Laura, tell us a little bit about the curriculum that you make.
Sure. So, as someone who works in the language area, what my emphasis is those meaningful repetitions. So I also have adapted books. Visuals are so important. Children with disabilities, especially moderate to significant disabilities, often know the vocabulary in their everyday worlds. That doesn't mean that they know the church words like baptism, disciples, those kinds of things. And when we're in the church, we just tend to think, oh, everybody knows those words. So the visuals help teach the kids the words. If we're not going to give them the visuals and the repetition, they're going to either ignore and tune out the instruction, which is going to lead to unwanted behavior, or they're going to come up with their own idea, which may or may not be correct. So the visuals just really cement that learning. We know that language understanding and expressing language is hard for children with disabilities. So, the more help that we can give them in explaining words through using simple sentences and through using visuals, the more that they're going to get out of instruction.
Since we're audio today and we can't show everybody what you guys make, we will put your websites in our show notes so people can click on it, take a look. But describe, Laura, what your adapted word Bibles kind of look like and how do teachers and students use them together?
So, the adapted books have Velcro pieces and they have the part of the story. So the children move over the Velcro pieces as we teach the story. That keeps their eyes looking, it keeps their hands engaged, it gives them a good concrete concept of what we're talking about. And then, like you said, with repetitions, Children with disabilities need that, but we know it's not just fun to repeat the same thing. So we don't want to present the adapted book and say, you're finished and we're going to do it again because you need the repetition. So I have extension activities like where they can use Play-Doh mats, but it also comes with instructions for volunteers or whoever's working with the child to extend the story.
So if I'm hearing you, the emphasis is on teaching the big themes and the big points through different types of repetition that is hands-on for the student to do?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, so they have Play-Doh, we have crafts, so even for children with significant disabilities who have trouble with their motor skills, they can smash the Play-Doh or they can smash the glued object down, so they can still be participating.
Yeah, that's great. And then Courtney, same question for you. Can you kind of describe, and you have a whole curriculum system with lots of different components to it. Can you describe a little bit about what you do and how people would use it?
Yeah, so our curriculum is like monthly units. It's a subscription based curriculum, and each month you get the new adapted book with the stories for each week. You get a lesson plan with the activities that support that. You get a sensory storytelling script. So it has ideas for items that you can use to help you tell the story that are sensory based, have suggestions for like songs and videos that correspond with the lesson. And then there's a craft that goes along with the lesson for the week.
I just want to stop here and say I have seen both of your guys' work, and it is fabulous. And one of the questions we get a lot at Wonderful Works, for those of you who know, we are working on the Adapted Discipleship Library, where we're going to have some 5-minute adapted Bible videos for kids, is what do I do the rest of the time? The videos we are making are 5 minutes long, and we have discussion questions that go with them that are designed to be a supplement at churches for kids with disabilities. But if you're wondering, how do I really teach these kids the gospel and have like a whole service worth? I think go to the Adapted Word, go to Awe and Wonder. This is what you guys do. Both of your curriculum is fabulous. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's got all the different components to really reinforce those themes and teach. So I just want to put that plug out there. Please do watch our 5-minute videos, but that is not going to be enough for students. So I hope that people will check out both your websites ASAP.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we love the videos that you guys are producing, and using the curriculums that we create alongside of those is really great.
Yeah, everybody works
Yeah.
together. So one question we get a lot from people is, how can they tell if a student, especially if they're nonverbal, is actually getting anything from what they're doing?
Sometimes we don't know if a student really understands, and that shouldn't prevent us from sharing the gospel or giving them access to the Bible just because we don't know if they're understanding. A lot of times, students are understanding way more than we think that they are. And so there's a phrase called presume competence, and we want to presume that they can understand, that they can learn, and we're going to present the stories the best way that we can, and let the Lord do the rest.
Amen. Yeah. I just want to encourage people, if you're not familiar with working with students who have disabilities, sometimes people can say they don't look like they're getting anything, they don't look like they're paying attention, and become discouraged and quit. Do not quit, because a lot of times they are getting it. They just are not able to show that to you at that time. And we've heard from parents later, like later at home, they said something. So God sees the heart, and your job is to just keep pouring in and don't stop. Are there any other really important things you feel church leaders or teachers should know when working with students who maybe have autism or maybe nonverbal or have an intellectual disability?
I think making it interactive is important. So, like Laura was sharing, those interactive pieces, both of our curriculums have those options to have interactive pieces, but also just in teaching, like what can you bring in that's sensory related that can be something that they can just hold with their hands while you're talking and that can connect to the story. That can be really helpful. Also, just want to plug the Wonderful Works videos.
Mhm.
You have so many tips and resources there when thinking about what are the barriers for this specific student to be able to participate and understand. The library of resources that you have probably has some tips. Uh, done such a great job with that.
Thank you. Laura, what would you tell people?
One thing we want to remember is that, part of teaching the Bible is building relationships
Mhm.
and making the children and their families feel welcome at church. So, for example, this past Sunday, school started in my area, and we had two kids who were really off because their routines had changed a
Yeah.
lot. And sometimes that happens with other things, like during holiday weeks, for example.
Mhm.
We sometimes it's okay just to be with the kid or to sit with a child and say, oh, this is your preferred toy. We want to, not every Sunday has to be kill and drill. We have to remember that showing love, reacting, and responding the way that Jesus would is a very big model. So, yes, I mean, obviously the curriculum is important because that's what I do and that's what Cortney does. But also, we have to remember that we have to live that out.
That is such a good point. What I'm hearing you say is before we can really teach kids, we have to connect with them because I would imagine for a lot of kids, if they're not in a place where their brain is calm enough to learn, then it doesn't matter what you do or what you teach them. So that relationship part where you are kind of setting up this is a safe space. Is that what you're saying? Is kind of like the first step in being setting them up for
Yes.
success?
Like on the input forms,
Mhm.
you can give me all the information, but really what I want to know is what makes your child feel safe and what makes your child feel loved. And then we can build from there.
Mhm.
You know, just tell it like Courtney said, if you've met one child with
Yeah.
autism, you've met one child because God created us all uniquely.
Yeah.
And so a diagnosis doesn't tell me as much as, oh, my child doesn't like bright sun, so can you sit him over here where the sun's not shining in the window?
Mhm. Right. Courtney, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely think that is so important. And I think that it communicates so much to parents as well if they see that our priority is making their child feel safe and loved. Because a lot of times parents are coming in and they have to fight and advocate for their child
Mm.
constantly. And so if church is a safe place where their child is comfortable, where they feel like they are a part, that's going to mean so much to the families as well as the children.
Mhm. So, ministry leaders, if you're listening, if you have a day where a kid is really struggling, they're just having an off day because we all have them. I'm having one today, but we all have them sometimes. And all you get accomplished that day is sitting with that child and helping them feel calm and safe. That is a win for the day, even if you didn't get through your checklist.
You're still modeling Jesus.
Yes. So, Courtney, tell me, since you have started Awe and Wonder, what is one thing that you have learned that kind of surprised you or inspired you?
A couple of things come to mind. Um, One, my understanding and my empathy for families impacted by disabilities has greatly increased. Um, I was used to working in the school environment and interacting with parents as a teacher, but through this ministry, getting to hear from so many families about their experiences at church has really shaped my perspective of how we need to do ministry. Just hearing their hearts and hearing their hurts and their disappointments, but their hope for the future is just so impactful. And so I think that that really has fueled my desire to
Mhm.
do this work, to be able to help make a difference in the church today. I'm also just so inspired by all of the many different ministry leaders who are doing this work and who are really pioneering a new field of ministry. We've seen churches who have done this, but not on a wide scale across the United States. I don't think that we have seen disability ministry be something that people are thinking about, and I'm excited about the future of it. Being at a disability in the church conference, getting to be around all of these different ministry leaders, it's exciting to see what God's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, same for you. Since you started the Adapted Word, have you learned anything that has surprised you or changed your perspective or given you some inspiration?
One thing that surprised me, I think, because I worked in the schools, is I thought, everybody, just because of that environment I was in, I thought, oh, everybody knows how to work with kids. Everybody
Uh,
knows what I do. And that is not
yeah.
true. And so, God revealed that to me, that, He has given me some skills that I can share with others. And I've gotten a lot of encouragement. This all started at my church. And, the first day I walked in to volunteer,
Mhm.
they said, "Oh, can you tell us what to do?" And I said, I don't know what you do to tell you, but I think, just the encouragement that I've gotten along the way that God's provided, that's been very inspirational. And then, just this whole, like Courtney said, this whole ministry, even though we're, I guess, quote, competitors, we can all get along because the greatest goal is getting all children to know the gospel. And
Mhm.
so, I've just loved meeting everybody. Everybody's been
Mhm.
very supportive. Everybody interconnects and tries to work towards that goal. So
Yeah.
that's very inspiring to see.
Yes, I agree. I want to stop there for a second because you said something that I had to work through myself a while back. Um, but in this disability ministry field, I will say it is the best field because people really are collaborative, and there really is like putting your drive for success to the side and focusing on what is the mission. And one of the things that helped me when I got started, thinking like, we're starting Wonderful Works, and oh, here's these other people doing the same thing. And what if they do it better than me? Like, yeah, well, sometimes you think things like that. At least I do. So I'm like, oh no, like, what if it's better? And what happened, I had to stop myself and ask, what is God thinking about this? What is God's perspective on this? Is he up there worrying, like, what if someone does something better than Barb? Like, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous when you think about it like that. So when I thought, like, what is God thinking? He's thinking, "Hooray! This organization is doing great work. Hooray! This organization is doing great work." And knowing that He has the perfect plan for unity within the organizations, as long as we all keep our eyes on the mission, and the mission is getting people to Christ, and knowing that we're all called to do our own little part, and there is no competition in this field because we're all teammates and God's going to work it out. That was like, for me, I guess I'll answer the question. Since I started Wonderful Works, that was a big perspective changer for me and has brought me so much peace as I've moved forward in this.
Absolutely. I'm the newcomer here.
Mhm.
All in Wonder has been around for about a year. And when we think about the church space as a whole and like curriculum as a whole
Mhm.
and just all of the many things that are available for churches, the
Mhm.
disability ministry sphere is pretty small
Yeah.
of what's available. And the people who are doing the work and creating resources have been so encouraging.
Mhm.
There's been not a spirit of competition. It's been championing one another. And that's been so encouraging to me as someone who has come in within the last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the other people in this field. But also I'm just grateful for God because, I can trust in He's already worked it all out and that He's just super excited about everybody. And I don't know, that was just, it really helped me. Speaking of starting out and doing these new things. Do either of you have any stories from families who have used your curriculum that you want to share?
We did have a big win this past week.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We have a little guy. He does not like to leave Sunday school. When
Uh-huh.
he's there, he's fine. But, when he's not there, when he has to leave, he thinks he's missing out on all the fun. He's never
Uh-huh.
going to come back. And we had tried a visual schedule, which he responded to okay, but it didn't help. So I talked to the children's minister and we broke it down. We're leaving what's going to be. I smile when I see my parents. I walk out the door. I get in the car. I wave bye. And I went over that with him several times, like at least 5 or 6 times. And he responded. So sometimes it's just knowing those expectations, with sometimes we see that unwanted behavior because they don't know what the expectations are. So
Right.
I don't know if it'll work next week, but that was just a big win for everybody because it caused less stress on his parents. And the workers the other volunteers didn't have to kind of help the situation or anything. So that was a recent win.
That is a big win. What about you, Courtney?
So, two things come to mind. One would be just hearing from many ministry leaders about how much the curriculum has helped them with being able to just minister to the families and not have to worry so much about creating resources and coming up with lessons and things like that. I think that's true for Laura and I both. Like, we're providing something that ministry leaders may not feel like they're equipped to create on their own, or they may just feel like they just don't have time to do. And so hearing the stories of how their ministry has changed because they're not focused on just creating, and they're focused on reaching and interacting with and serving their families has been really cool. The second one is a specific situation where one of our subscribers had talked about they had an adult with disabilities who was using our curriculum, and they had really got a lot of buy-in. It was a smaller church, so they were sharing like outside of their classroom about like what they're learning and all of these things, and like different church members were asking them about what's your Bible verse or what's your repeated line and things like that. And this person with disabilities ended up passing away. And so the mom shared, um, the mom shared that it made such a difference because her daughter was known. And it wasn't just people feeling sorry for them, but they were missing her. And so the fact that the curriculum was able to provide that for them, provide that connection with the church as a whole, was really impactful for me.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we talked about in the beginning. Inclusion means being known. It means being part. And when you make that way and you connect with people, that's what happens. That is a life changer. And if you think of their parents, like what a gift to those parents, the difference of knowing that their daughter was known and loved and is missed. That's huge. Thank you for sharing that. But now you've got us all misty. Courtney. But my goodness. If nothing else, if you're listening to this today and you don't take away anything else, take that away. That what you do on Sundays and what you do to minister to families affected by disability matters. Not just for eternity, but also for today. Wow. Talking about what matters most is our relationship with Christ. And I want to hear a little bit about each of your faith stories, how you kind of got there, if you guys are okay to share some of that. So, Laura, you started to talk about something at disability in the church, and I don't know if it's a story you would want to share or not, so don't feel
Okay.
obligated.
Uh-huh.
But do I remember correctly that you started to say something like you had had like a brain tumor or something?
Yes.
Is there a God story in there? Because I remember sitting at the edge of my seat at the conference going like, "What happened next?" And then you never shared it. Is that something you
Yes,
would want
and
to share?
I am fine sharing it. Um, yeah, so what happened in the spring of 2020, as the world was changing for everybody, I started getting headaches, which was new to me.
Mhm.
And at the time, my parents were going through aging and end of life. And, the world was changing. So, and work was very stressful. So I thought that was it.
Mhm.
But it turns out I had a non cancerous brain tumor, which was causing all of these headaches, but
Wow.
it took a few months to diagnose that. So
Mhm.
during that time, my family and friends were actually telling me, Laura, you are not listening to God. He wants you to go with the adapted word. But it's hard to leave a job
Mhm.
that you know that you have a steady paycheck in
Mhm.
to go into something I have no business experience,
Yeah.
And so, that was a big call from God.
Mhm. So you found out you had so let me hear you found out you had a brain tumor while you
It's
were trying to
not,
make this decision about are you leaving your
yeah.
work and then
Well, it was a non-cancerous brain tumor,
okay.
which was removed with surgery.
Okay.
And, but during that time, I had to take 4 weeks off for recovery. And God just really talked to me and assured me that this was going to be okay.
Yeah.
That this is, He'd given me the skills, He'd given me the
Mhm.
experience, and now I needed to take that leap.
Yeah. So was it in that time when you were recovering from surgery when you had to kind of be still and quiet, I would imagine?
Yes.
That when are you saying that is when you really heard from God because you finally rested and quieted enough to hear from him?
Yes, and there's a verse I think in Psalms that
Yeah.
basically says like if you don't listen to God, He will make you listen to He'll
Yeah.
make you lay down and rest. And
Yeah.
I felt that that was exactly what happened because during recovery, I wasn't reading books or watching TV. And when our minds
Mhm.
are still, it's hard for me not to have something going on, but definitely that's when I talked to God, or He talked to me rather. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
once you made that decision and you made that leap to leave your job and start this,
Yeah.
what happened next? Did you have peace in it? Were you terrified? I mean, how'd you feel?
Both,
Yeah.
both. I actually, because I know nothing about business,
Yeah.
and I actually met somebody. Her name is Brittany Nelson. She has a website called Deeper Kidmen.
Mhm.
So she's also not just disabilities, but she's also in the kidmen field.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she was just starting out as a business coach. So I was one of her first people. So she gave me a lot of good advice starting out. Everything just came all together. Yeah, so it was hard, and I'm definitely still learning the
Yeah,
business side, but God provides, and He's been there.
I love it. Courtney, do you want to share anything about your faith journey or your leap into starting On Wonder?
Sure. So I accepted Christ at a young age and grew up in the church. Felt a call on my life to ministry when I was in high school.
Mhm.
When I was in high school, I didn't really understand the full scope of what that could mean. So
Mhm.
in my mind, I was going to be a missionary, and that's what I went to school thinking that I was preparing to do. And when I got to Liberty University, is where I went, and when I got there. The Lord opened my eyes to so many different ways that He could use me to serve,
Mhm.
and so had a passion for women's ministry, biblical studies, and helping people understand the Bible. And met my husband there. He was also in biblical studies. He's pastor now, and so we have served together in ministry for almost 15 years, and it's been wonderful. It's been a journey that's had its ups and downs. And we've had to lean on him for lots of things. But it's been really cool to see just like those little pieces of the story that we thought this was a roadblock or this was, a mess up in the plan,
Yeah.
has been used later. So becoming a special education teacher was never in my plan.
Yeah.
It was something because we didn't a ministry job fell through. We had to get marketplace jobs, and so I went in as a special education assistant, and then went back to school for special education. And we look back now and see how the Lord's
Yeah.
hand was in all of that.
So when that happened, when you thought you were going to go into ministry, a ministry job, air quotes, and that fell through, did you feel at the time like, I guess God isn't ready to use me yet, or what were you thinking?
I think that more than that, it was fighting against resentment for the
Hmm.
church.
Hmm.
Um, and I think for ministry leaders, a lot of times that is a struggle for us.
Yeah.
It's we are hurt by the church.
Hmm.
Uh, depending on God's people to provide
Hmm.
for your salary, sometimes takes faith,
Yeah.
and sometimes things just don't work out like you think they're going to. But
Hmm.
you can't hold that against the bride of Christ.
Right.
You can't take that to mean that God doesn't want me to do this.
Right.
And so, it's just seeking the Lord on, how is this going to look for our life? How is ministry going to look like, even if it's not in this particular context that we
Yeah.
thought it was going to be?
So you already had felt that call to ministry.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think this is really important for people to hear. When you get that call to ministry, and you know when you have it, right?
Hmm.
Um, it's not up to the men or women as to whether you get to do it or not.
Yeah.
It's really, if God calls you to ministry and you continue being willing as you were, He will make it work out, however that looks like, however He wants it. Because what I love about your story is I would imagine when you didn't get that ministry job, air quotes, you probably thought, well, I can't work in ministry right now. But God already knew your ministry was going to be in disability. And so you're taking that special education job was your ministry.
Right. Yeah, I didn't see it at the time, but
Yeah.
he was preparing me for ministry that he had down the road.
Yeah. And I just think, I just want anyone listening to this, the theme, what I like about doing this podcast is I talk to people, I never kind of know where the conversation is going to go. And then by the end of the podcast, a theme has emerged, is what I feel like. And the theme here is discouragement isn't always what you think. Like sometimes you might have felt discouraged at that time, but God was up there thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited Courtney is taking this special education job. This is exactly what I have for her." And there was the blessing.
Hmm.
And we talked about earlier, like sometimes when you're pouring in the gospel to students who maybe don't can't communicate back to you in the way you expect, a lot of people feel discouraged, but you shouldn't, because God can see their heart and He may be seeing, oh my gosh, they're getting it. I'm so excited. And all of these things that I think when we feel discouraged in life, maybe that says our sign that we need to stop and really do a perspective change and ask, what is God thinking about this, and lean in.
Hmm.
I don't know. That's just what I hear from your guys' stories, and I love it because I love that encouragement. And I just think that there's so much opportunity for each one of us when we stop looking at the things in the way we think we should see them and start looking at them from asking, how does God see this, and what does He want from this? And I love your story, Courtney. That is just, it's beautiful. Is there anything that either one of you would like to leave with our listeners? About pouring the gospel into all learners.
Kind of what we've already said, that even when you think you're not getting anywhere, you are. One of the things we have to remember for children who are non-speakers is they are excellent observers because that's what they do. And we have to remember the more that we pour in, it's God's plan, like we talked about, and we're just the vessels for that.
Yeah, kind of going along with that is willingness to see the hard work that we have to put into it as worth it. That this is a holy work, that this is a God-filled work, and that it can be hard. Ministry can be hard. Disability ministry can be hard. Behavioral issues can be hard, but it's worth it. And I always say with Awe and Wonder, the gospel is for everyone, and we have to keep that in the forefront of our mind, that we're providing access to the gospel, and we're fulfilling the Great Commission through this work.
Amen. Cortney, tell us where we can find Awe and Wonder resources.
You can go to www.specialneedsministryresources.com. You can also find me on Instagram. You can probably just type in Awe and Wonder and find us.
And Laura, tell us where we can find the Adapted Word.
My website is www.theadaptedword.com. And I'm also on Instagram. It's the Adapted Word with a period between the period, adapted period word.
Well, thank you guys so much for the beautiful work that you do and for sharing it with us today on our podcast. We're so glad to have you here. To learn more about these amazing adapted Bible resources, please visit theadaptedword.com and specialneedsministryresources.com. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, please follow and share with others. See you next time.